In our politics lead, a whistleblower is coming forward with claims that DOGE not only accessed data from his agency, but also took a substantial amount of sensitive data with them.
A DOGE whistleblower has insights as to what Elon's band of hackers are actually up to, and now that he's come forward, he is being threatened. But before I get too far into this, let's hear more from Jake Tapper and just get a quick overview of what whistleblower Daniel Baroulis has found.
According to a disclosure shared with Congress, quote, around 10 gigabytes of data, or quote, the equivalent of a full stack of encyclopedias worth if someone printed these files as hard copy documents, unquote. Now, that data came from the National Labor Relations Board. That's an independent federal agency that investigates allegedly unfair labor practices by private sector employers and unions and collects and stores sensitive and confidential information in the process.
Baroulis has basically confirmed that which we all have suspected, that Elon Musk and the Trump administration do not have good intentions with DOGE. DOGE is not operating with any intent to make our government run more efficiently. It was all just a cult slogan to get mass buy-in from the people, because who doesn't want a more efficient government? Instead, according to the findings of the NLRB, DOGE has been stealing and deleting information from various government agencies and departments and potentially funneling information to Russia. This all started last month when DOGE wanted access into the NLRB systems. They said they needed to monitor the agency's data for compliance with the Trump administration's policies, all in an effort, of course, to help the Bureau run more efficiently. However, once the DOGE engineers were able to access that data, the NLRB noticed that data was actually leaving their agency. NPR did a huge write-up on the official whistleblower disclosure that was shared with Congress and said of the data, it's possible that the data included sensitive information on unions, ongoing legal cases, and corporate secrets, data that 4 labor law experts tell NPR should almost never leave the NLRB, and that has nothing to do with making the government more efficient or cutting spending. Meanwhile, according to the disclosure and records of internal communications, members of the DOGE team asked that their activities not be logged on the system and then appeared to try to cover their tracks behind them, turning off monitoring tools and manually deleting records of their access, evasive behavior that several cybersecurity experts interviewed by NPR compared to what criminal or state-sponsored hackers might do. I mean, I guess they are technically state-sponsored hackers, but they didn't even need to hack into the system. They just forced their way in by creating a government agency based on false pretense. But as if that isn't bad enough, here is Baroulis and his attorney, Andrew Buckeye, detailing an aspect of all of this that might not be surprising, all things considered, but it is still incredibly concerning.
There are 2 data points that I want to point out that should give everybody pause. The first thing, what Dan witnessed, was that within 15 minutes of DOGE employees creating user accounts, i.e. usernames and passwords, within 15 minutes of those accounts being created, somebody or something from Russia tried to log in with the right username and right passwords, that is to say, the right credentials, and that happened over 20 times. The second data point, which is really critical, is that DOGE has also been using Starlink as a means to exfiltrate data. What that means is that, from our understanding, that Russia has a direct pipeline of information through Starlink, which means that anything going through Starlink is going to Russia. We also know that this is not unique to the NLRB. This is happening government-wide. And then the other thing that I wanted to flag for everybody is that right now, and I don't want to say that this is intentional, it could very well have been a mistake, is that critical infrastructure databases in many government agencies, as we understand it, have been exposed to the open internet, which includes critical databases at the Department of Energy, which includes a lot of our nuclear regulatory agency material.
Like I said, very concerning, and I feel like that's putting it mildly. And while it's natural to wonder if there's any merit to any of this, keep in mind that a report has been submitted to Congress, so this isn't just some guy trying to get on CNN. Also, if there was no merit to any of what he's saying, then why is DOGE worried about him to the point of threatening him in his own home? Baroulis says that as he was blowing the whistle before the report was even filed with Congress, he received a message at his house along with drone photographs of him walking his dog.
The message was clear, although poorly constructed. It was to stop looking, stop reporting. The pictures were of me walking my dog. from above?
Basically,
Like a satellite photo?
No, it was actually taken by a drone. Yeah. What's really disturbing about all of this is that we had somebody literally either themselves or have somebody go to Dan's home and tape a threatening note, a menacing note that included a lot of personal information. There was a clear reference to his whistleblowing activities ahead of our filing, and with an image basically threatening him as he's walking his dog.
Of course, nothing ever exists in a vacuum. This isn't the first time that DOGE has come under fire for shady practices. Here's more from NPR. The whistleblower story sheds further light on how DOGE is operating inside federal systems and comes on the heels of testimony in more than a dozen court cases across the United States that reveal how DOGE rapidly gained access to private financial and personal information on hundreds of millions of Americans. It's unclear how or whether DOGE is protecting the privacy of that data. Meanwhile, the threatening note, though its origins are unknown, is reflective of the current climate of fear and intimidation toward whistleblowers. The story goes that once DOGE arrived at the NLRB, they demanded the highest level of access, which would give them unrestricted permission to manipulate the data, read, copy, alter, delete. Usually when lawyers or the inspector general, for instance, need access to the system, they don't even get this level of access. They're typically given guest accounts on the system with the ability to simply access information that's relevant to their specific purpose. When an IT staffer at the NLRB suggested ways for DOGE to access accounts while allowing their activities to be tracked, which is a common best practice whenever accessing any kind of internal data, the DOGE team allegedly told the IT guys to stay out of their way. And it was because they had no intention of leaving any kind of trail regarding what they were doing in the system. According to Baroulis, that was a huge red flag. That's something that you just don't do. It violates every core concept of security and best practice. But a few days after DOGE had accessed the systems, Baroulis noticed something else. MIT grad and DOGE engineer Jordan Wick had a public account on GitHub where he had been sharing coding information about different projects that he was a part of. The account had been shared on X by journalist Roger Sollenberger, and that's when Baroulis noticed the title of one of Wick's properties, NXGen BDOR Extract or NXGen Backdoor Extract. NXGen is the internal system that is used by the NLRB that was designed and built just for them. Engineers explained to NPR, while many of the NLRB's records are eventually made public, the NXGen case management system hosts proprietary data from corporate competitors, personal information about union members or employees voting to join a union, and witness testimony in ongoing cases. Access to that data is protected by numerous federal laws, including the Privacy Act. Jake Braun, a former acting principal deputy national cyber director at the White House and the current executive director of the Cyber Policy Initiative at the University of Chicago, said of the backdoor extract and of the fact that DOGE team members refused to allow their activities to be tracked, if he didn't know the backstory, any chief information security officer worth his salt would look at network activity like this and assume it's a nation-state attack from China or Russia. Later, when Baroulis was parsing through what he could of what DOGE left behind, which wasn't much, he was able to see that DOGE accessed the NLRB's cloud systems, and he saw that they used something called a container, which is a virtual computer that runs programs on a machine without being detected by the rest of the network. Whatever is done within the container is non-detectable once the container is removed. Then he noticed a huge spike in data leaving the agency, almost all of which was text files. 10 gigabytes left the agency, but it's unclear if data was deleted, copied, or even compressed, which would mean that even more data than what's apparent could have been exfiltrated. Now that the story is out and being talked about in mainstream media outlets, apart from the threats made against Baroulis, there has been some pushback. But what happens now? Congress has the report, but Congress is majority Republican and minority do-nothing Democrats. Here is what Baroulis' attorney had to say about a potential way forward.
What we're asking for is an investigation, somebody to look at this and take this seriously. Because, you know what? there's personal identifiable information affecting American citizens that's flying out from the United States government, likely to Russia. But if that's not enough, then it's our national security. I mean, at some point, we all have to collectively wake up and say no and rebuild. Because unfortunately, I'm concerned that we're in a place where we can't undo what has been done, but we can know what happened, who did something wrong, hold people accountable, even if it's, at some point in time in the future, and rebuild, because that's where we need to be.
And again, the request here is for an independent investigation by law enforcement and Congress.
So what's going to happen, we'll have to see, but we'll also see in the coming days, I'm sure, how right-wing media, Elon Musk, and the president try to explain all of this away. Can't wait. All right, that's it for me. If you got something out of this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks.